Hi everybody, my name is Victoria Peters and I chose Japan as my country. Something interesting about Japan is I actually have a friend who travels there for work, and he's been doing that for about 3 years, and he trades cars there and he also purchases cars there. And so when I heard about him doing business in Japan a couple of years ago and going every year as well, I started to get really interested in asking him questions just because of his feedback on the country. And he had described the country as very clean and sustainable and efficient, and I really wanted to dive in and learn more about this country. So the context of culture, there is a very specific way that Japanese people do business. Jap Japan does differ from the US in ways that they do business because they are a high context culture, which means that they value relationships and understandings over quick greetings and deals. So they really value getting to know people instead of just meeting for a specific business transaction. They really like to get to know you as a person and your business and more about you so that they can establish trust. So that ties into there's a bond that you need to establish to successfully do business in this country. The currency and exchange in Japan is the currency is the yen. It is equal to a little bit over $1. Tipping in this country is not acceptable. They have a very different way of how they serve their customers there in Japan. In fact, that tipping can also be considered rude. They usually ask for the cost of the meal up front to avoid lingering money. So tipping is definitely not a custom there. Another actually interesting fact about the currency and exchange is if you were not able to have Japanese money or you encountered an emergency, all 7-Elevens in Japan can actually give you money from their ATM in whatever country you're from. So they offer your bank cards at the 7-Elevens. So that's really cool just in case you get into a bind there. The business ethics in Japan are definitely different than the US, I would say. The legal system is similar to ours. Japanese have a very similar legal system to ours here in the US. It's the judicial system. We both have higher courts, and Japan follows the civil law system. So very similar in the sense of if you were to violate the law, you would be seen in court and by a judge. Money and gift giving is um, not a way that they conduct business. So it would not be common that you would be bringing gifts or exchanging, especially on a first meeting. Prevailing customs in Japan are different than the US. They do shaking and bowing usually for their greetings. The way that they eat differs as well from us, but I will actually get into that more on a different slide. Business etiquette in Japan. This was one of my favorite things that I've learned about Japan. I just love that their traditions are they're so old, but they still have the same traditions today in traditional business as well and in professional settings. Japanese people are very much about politeness and patience. So the first thing that you would want to do when conducting business in Japan is to be patient and show as much respect as you can. They do dress with modesty, so they do expect that as well of you as a business person doing business in Japan. They do use traditional U.S. business clothing, so suits and ties are very common. You'll see a lot of darker clothing. Women as well will also have the suits and ties. The negotiating process in business etiquette is usually takes place over a meal, believe it or not. They do enjoy having that camaraderie and having a more of a relaxed setting because again, that lets them know you better and they build trust that way. When you meet somebody in Japan, because you don't know their customs, it's very, very safe to either go with a bow or if they extend their hand, a very gentle handshake. Most of the time they'll lead you, so that's nice to all because sometimes you don't know if you can touch them or what is considered inappropriate or appropriate. So definitely a bow would be your first way to go. Their main language is Japanese, and I'm really sorry. I'm going to try to attempt to say a couple words. I do know that please and thank you. I did try that online and I could not say it really well, but I'll try. Uh, Onga and arigato. So that's something really, really important because again, they're all about being polite there. And it's very, very good to say please and thank you. I know that also just trying to have some kind of language said to them in their language is very respectful. So even if you slightly mispronounce or it just still shows that you have respect for their country and for their culture. So you should always learn the at least bare minimum basic languages. Hello, goodbye, please, thank you. Um, the Japanese language is very complicated. So it is recommended that you do hire a translator, although in the main cities like Tokyo and Okasana, they actually do have a lot of English spoken. It's a well-traveled area, but if you want to travel outside or get around easily, it's definitely recommended that you do get a translator. So safety and travel expectations. Right now, there are no current travel restrictions, even with COVID. They had lifted that about 5 months ago, I believe. Japan is a relatively safe country. They are known around the world as a safe country to travel, especially the main cities like Tokyo and Okasana, where people do frequent for business and tourist activities. They are considered relatively safe just as long as you follow just normal precautions like you do here in the US. Just like know your surroundings and just make sure that you're not disrespecting anybody or, doing something that would upset anybody. They sometimes are judgmental of foreigners entering the country, and like that ties into what I said before. Just be really respectful, very polite, very patient, and try to know if you don't have a translator, the basic words, and don't keep yourself with a lot of money on you or noticeable that you have money or that you're confused or a traveler. You really have to immerse yourself and be confident in that experience so that you travel around safely. Um, Also, I wanted to touch up on how to get around in Japan because this is something that I learned that was kind of cool to know is how much you're going to be traveling when you go to Japan because Japan is a very long, almost island. It is a country, but it is mainly traveling by train to get to places. You will be traveling by taxi and by airline often to travel within Japan. Um, this is really important to know because of the way that it is part of your safety as well, that you are going to be very mobile all the time. So even to get from an airport to a hotel, you would expect to take at least a train and a taxi. And so if you travel light, that would probably be better and safer. Again, making sure that it's not very known that you have anything valuable on yourself would be really, really smart. Okay, moving on. Business transactions in Japan are similar to the US in the sense that they do take places in professional settings. Like I said earlier, Japan definitely values relationships, so some of the times it is done over a meal or they do invite you to dinner, and that's kind of where you start to build your relationship and even close a deal at times. Business transactions in their economy would be, so if you went to a market or a store, the vendors are mostly cash transactions because there is a lot of vendors going on in Japan. They still have a lot of markets and places to buy goods. They do definitely have a lot of domestic goods there that people really love to take back to their countries if they're traveling. In the stores and malls, they do take cash and electronic payments. So just like us here in the US, they are definitely in the tech world. So they actually are the second leading tech leader in the world. So they do have the same technology we have, in fact, even more advanced. They could even offer apps now and how to transfer your money from your foreign currency into theirs to buy products there on demand immediately, which is really, really cool. I think we're still catching up to that in the US as well. So that was something really, really interesting that I had heard. Professional, socializing, and diversity issues. So Japan encourages socializing in the professional setting. I do touch up on this a lot because it is very heavy in the culture that they do value relationship building. So when you talk and you converse, that is something that builds relationship and trust. So they do encourage that between men and women as well. They are getting better at that. They used to not be as good as having men and women in the same place, but especially in those bigger cities, that are doing a lot more business with the US because they can with the technology upgrade that they have. They're really pushing to encourage both male and female to converse as well. They do have regular diversity issues that we also have here in the US. So there's still discrimination between men and women in the workplace. There's still racial discrimination. They are a very tight-knit country, so they are still trying to evolve just like we are in the US. So they are trying to diversitize the workplace because in Japan, the workforce is still mostly long-term working males. So this has been a tradition in Japan for a very long time, and there are not a lot of female workers there. So they are really trying to push the females in the workplace. So that's really cool that they're trying to move on from that really hardcore tradition that they had. Eating customs in Japan are different than the US for sure. They do have different utensils than us, first of all. So when you go to eat a meal, you won't find your classic fork and knife that you do here. It's usually chopsticks and a bigger spoon. They do care about where you sit at the table. So if you do not know Japan and their cultures and their customs, the best thing to do is be patient and wait till everybody sits down and then you find your place at the table, because usually there are spaces for specific people and where their positions and where they sit at the table. So like I said, just take a step back and let them sit first and then kind of guide you to where you go. This applies in the public setting as well. So they're going to definitely, if you're with a group of friends or in a business professional setting, even if you're at a restaurant and it feels like a more relaxed area, it's still better that you wait until everybody's seated so that you know your place there too. Slurping is a sign of respect and enjoyment. So you're going to be eating a lot of soups and noodles, and that's something that you don't have to. And in the US, we kind of try to abstain from slurping or making any. We don't make a lot of noises at the table, but in Japan, it's very custom that you will hear noises at the table. So don't be alarmed. And sightseeing. So Mount Fuji, I've heard about this for the longest time. This is a really, really famous mountain. I believe people even like climb it very often. So it's one of their, I think it's their biggest mountain peak in Japan. Hiroshima is another big place that they like to go sightseeing. Tokyo is a big, big spot. So it's one of the biggest business capitals actually in the world. So Japan is the third leader in the economy. So Tokyo is definitely well traveled. And more on the touristy side, cherry blossom festivals are very, very common there. That's what Japan is known for, is their cherry blossoms. They're really, really beautiful pink trees, as you can see in the picture, kind of like flowers. So yeah, so that's a little bit about Japan. I still am working on my sources. Sorry about that. But yeah, I hope you learned a lot from it, and I know I did. So thank you.